The MCAT Cars Podcast, session number 27. The Cars section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT Cars Podcast. My name, as always, is Dr. Ryan Gray, and again, I am joined by Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. At this podcast, we help you break down what the author is trying to tell you in passages. Now, the title of this podcast is the MCAT Cars Podcast, so you may assume that we are only helping you with the cars section. But truth be told, when it comes to reading comprehension, which is what we're helping you with here, these skills are transferable to every section of the MCAT, and even in the future when it comes to your other board exams. So hopefully, listening to this podcast will help you with your MCAT score in general, as well as every other test that you take in life. This week, we have a fun article all about homework and technology. All right, Jack Westin back for some more MCAT Cars podcasts. Last week, we talked all about TB and its effect on how we live today in our beautiful, clean, pristine kitchens and houses. This week, what's in store for us?
So we're going to look at a really easy passage to read, but usually the easier the passages are, the harder the questions get. So they'll test on the nuances of a particular paragraph and things that they briefly mentioned when you get easier to read passages. So that's something to keep in mind.
And because of that, there's a strategy I always see students talking about of go ahead and skim all of the passages as you get into the car section, even some of the other sections as well. Look at each of the passages and kind of score them. That's an easy one, that's a hard one, and then start with the hard ones or start with the easy ones, however they want to do it. Because you're saying the easier read passages are potentially the harder question ones, is that a strategy you encourage?
My opinion is you have to go through all 9 passages, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to read them all. If you want to get a good score, you have to pretty much read them all. I mean, I know some students who only read the first 8 or first 7 out of the 9, and they try their best out of those first 7 or 9. I think that's a mistake. I think there are easy questions on every passage. On every passage, there are easy questions. So you have to go through every passage. And going through and trying to figure out which one's easy and hard by skimming is not easy. And that alone takes so much time and brain power. You might as well just do it the way they provide it to you, right? Just read them all in the order they give it to you in. But the one thing that you can do is if you get to a difficult question or you get to a passage that has more difficult questions, come back to the questions later, right? I mean, you can come back to most of those questions later after you've done the easier ones. So I don't mind skipping questions. I just don't think you should skip passages. I think you have to do them all anyway, so might as well do them in the order that they give it to you in.
Okay, makes sense. All right, let's go ahead and start again. If you want to follow along with us, which I encourage you to do, click on the description in the podcast app that you're listening to this, and the link to the article will be there. Go to MCATcarspodcast.com. All right, first paragraph. In decades past, students needed little more than paper, pencils, and time to get their schoolwork done. Ooh, all right, schoolwork, something we're all familiar with. And so they're talking about the past, saying, hey, we didn't need that much to get things done. All right. For the vast majority of students, that's no longer the case. All right. So the author set up, here's how it used to be, and now it's not that way anymore.
Right.
All right. Most schoolwork these days necessitates a computer and an internet connection, and that includes work to be done at home. So no longer just having paper and pencils. Now we need a computer and internet connection, and now we have to do stuff at home as well. So work is expanding. One federal survey found that 70% of American teachers assign homework that needs to be done online. 90% of high schoolers say they have to do internet-based homework at least a few times a month. So surveying, saying there are a lot of work is being done at home and online, which is a bummer. so
Okay.
much work. And then nearly half of all students say they get such assignments daily or almost daily. So it looks like they are laying out some sort of argument. All right, I was going to go down into let me try to guess what they're trying to tell me, which I shouldn't do. Right? You tell me all the time. Don't do that. Just tell me what they said. And so they're
Right.
saying that previously students could use paper and pencils, and that's it to get schoolwork done. And now a lot of the work is requiring online access and obviously a computer to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine if you go into a middle school today or a high school today, I think that everyone has an iPad, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
something. So you can only imagine that. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward paragraph, kind of relatable. It's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, we have more electronic stuff, internet stuff today than we did in the past.
Yeah. All right. Next paragraph. Yet, despite the seemingly ever-growing embrace of digital learning in schools, access to the necessary devices remains unequal, with a new report from the Pew Research Center finding that 15% of U.S. households with school-aged children lack high-speed internet at home. All right, so setting up some disparity here, saying that some students, even with all of this required online access, that 15% of households don't have high-speed internet.
Sounds good. Yes, this inequality.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The problem is particularly acute for low-income families. 1 in 3 households that make below $30,000 a year lacks internet. All right, so again, this inequality that you just brought up, the unequal, and so they're pointing out the inequality, saying with low-income families, a third of them don't have internet. This is despite an emerging reality in which poorer students are attending schools that evangelize technology-based learning, while their more affluent counterparts, as the New York Times reported this past weekend, are, quote, going back to wooden toys and the luxury of human interaction. Oh, this is interesting. I was just listening to a podcast that was talking about this. That like now the way to flash your wealth is to have interaction, human interaction, and not just the toys anymore. So it's very strange this is coming up. But anyway,
it's kind of like if you think about it, America, Canada, we have the most accessible market to meet, right? And what do? We're going vegan, right? Not to say that's bad. I think that's great, but it's just interesting, like there's the countries that die to eat, meat, right? But then we are not necessarily that interested in meat anymore. So yeah, interesting to point out this. And this is the point where it can get hard, where they can start asking questions about this, right? So, what would the higher class or people with more money do, right? Do they want internet or do they want to be taught stuff based on the internet or not, right? So you have to be careful with that. You have to really pay attention to this sentence. Yeah, great point. Okay.
Okay. Next paragraph. It's a glaring irony that's also a major force behind class and race-based discrepancies in academic achievement. It's a glaring irony that's also a major force behind class and race-based discrepancies. So I'm confused because I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what it's trying to tell me here. It's a glaring irony.
Don't read too much into it. Yeah. Right? What have we read before? So just to clarify what they were talking about before, because I don't think I did a good job at clearing that up. What does it mean when they say that the New York Times reported this past weekend are going back, the affluent counterparts, the affluent meaning the richer families, going back to wooden toys and the luxury of human interaction? Well, wooden toys is probably the exact opposite of electronics.
Yep.
Human interaction is probably something that you don't do when you're on your phone, you're on your iPad, right? So it's trying to say that these affluent kind of families are tending to stay away from electronics, at least to some degree. Now, is this important? We'll see if they talk about it, if they go into it. It could be a good transition into another argument, into another discussion altogether. But at this point, that's all we know. Now, when they say it's a glaring irony that has a major force behind class, they're probably referring back to the fact that, these less well-off families need internet and computers, right? Which they can't afford. And you have these higher income classes that don't need it, and they can afford it, but they don't need it, right? So it's kind of ironic, right, in that case, right? So that's kind of where they're going with this. They're headed towards a direction of, oh wow, look, these classes, all these classes need internet or computers, and they might not have access to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In what's often referred to as the, quote, homework gap, the unequal access to digital devices and high-speed internet prevents 17% of teens from completing their homework assignments, according to the new Pew analysis, which surveyed 743 students ages 13 through 17. So, again, just kind of drawing upon the need to do homework online with an internet connection, saying that 70% of teens aren't able to do that.
Okay.
Black teens are especially burdened by the homework gap. 1 in 4 of them at least sometimes struggle to complete assignments because of a lack of technology at home. So giving a specific demographic, saying black teens are especially hit hard by this. And close to half of teenagers in the bottom income bracket have to do their homework on a cell phone occasionally or often. So again, just pointing out this inequality, the lower bottom income bracket students needing to use their cell phone, which typically will have access to the internet.
Sounds good. Now, a common way that they'll trick you is they'll bring up a question that's very obvious, very easy to understand, and they'll ask you, where is this inequality? Is it within the schools? Is it within the homes? Right? Where is this inequality? And you're supposed to know that they're really bringing up the inequality in homes, in the actual homes of these students, not necessarily their schools. So being aware of that is going to be able to help you get some points on this test.
Okay. Next paragraph. From a history class assignment on the political debate over immigration to required participation in an online discussion board for AP Environmental Science, access to a functioning computer and high-speed internet is all but a prerequisite for success in high school. So just pointing out the kind of the use cases of needing the high-speed internet. This is becoming especially true as schools gravitate towards software where students file assignments and papers virtually, as well as schools that equip each student with a laptop or tablet. One 2017 survey found that half of U.S. teachers have one device for each of their students, up 10 percentage points from the year prior. So again, giving more use cases where there's a potential struggle for students needing to file assignments online, schools that equip students with a tablet or laptop.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Lots of technology all around.
And it's all about homework, assignments,
yeah.
right? So you have to be aware of that. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Close to 2 in 3 teachers use technology in their classroom daily, according to a separate 2017 survey. So this paragraph just seems to highlight the importance of technology in school nowadays. And the previous paragraphs, it's talking about lack of internet access at home, and then they're contrasting that or expanding on that by saying, look, there's so much technology in school that students are kind of going to need to have access to everything that they have in school at home as well.
Right.
Okay, next paragraph. The homework gap can have major consequences, with some studies suggesting that teens who lack access to a computer at home are less likely to graduate from high school, than their more technologically equipped peers. So now we're given consequences. Before, we're just said, hey, students are being asked to do all this stuff online, and that there are these schools or students that don't have access to this, and now we're shown the consequences, that they're less likely to graduate from high school.
Okay.
The challenge to complete homework in safe, predictable, and productive environments can have lifelong impacts on their ability to achieve their full potential, wrote John Brenham, who runs an innovative initiative to provide lacking teens with internet access, in an op-ed for the Hetchinger Report last year. So this John Brenham guy just says, look, we need to provide students with a safe and predictable environment for their success.
Sounds good. So what's the summary for this paragraph?
This last paragraph?
Yeah.
I think it goes to that first sentence to say they're less likely to graduate high school. They're more likely or less likely to be successful if they're lacking access to a computer and internet.
Great. Now, what's the big picture? What does the author want to convey in this passage?
So big picture, I think the author is trying to paint a picture of how important technology is in school and out of school now because of all the homework, and that there's a lot of inequality with access to those tools to make students successful.
That's it. Inequality, right? That some students do not have access to these computers and internet connections that they need, right? So great. That's it.
Okay. So not a terribly hard passage like you said. What can be hard question-wise from something like this?
They'll ask questions like, oh, where does the author expect you to know this is from? Is this related to colleges, related to the US in general, Europe, right? So they'll ask you very broad questions. And the only way you can answer those questions is if you actually read the passage. And typically these kinds of questions will require a little bit more careful analysis of what you read. So knowing, okay, they're talking about the fact that you don't have internet or computers at home, right? That's the big point that they're trying to make, not necessarily at schools, right? They don't mention how schools have inequality. They're mentioning how the homes are unequal. So they'll trick you by making you unaware of how subtle these answer choice differences will be. Right? A lot of students have this issue where they'll look at two answers and go, wait a second, these two answers are saying the same exact thing. But when you're careful with what they're saying, you'll notice that there's a slight discrepancy. There's a slight difference between these two answers based on maybe one word or the way they phrase the answer choice. And that can only be deduced if you actually read the passage. If you actually notice the little things that they made an emphasis on, like the homework, right? The fact that this is affecting U.S. households, right? The fact that some of the more affluent children aren't necessarily using computers, right? Because most people will think, okay, well, if you're affluent, you have computers, or you have access to them, or you're going to use them, right? But the passage mentions a point that's contrary to what most people will think. Mm-hmm. So if you weren't careful in reading that, you may fall for that, right? You may actually end up thinking, okay, well, maybe if the less well-off children don't have internet or computers, the more well-off children do, and they like it. Well, it doesn't seem like that, right? If you actually read the passage, so you just have to be very careful with every sentence you read.
All right, there you have it. A fun little article. Again, if you are not following along with the articles, I highly recommend that you do. You can follow along in the description of this podcast, in the podcast app that you are listening to. If you swipe or tap or do something with the artwork, they usually will take you to the description, and the link to the article is in there. Or you can just go to MCATcarspodcast.com and find all of the information there as well. If you are looking for a course to help you, if you're struggling with the CARS section, with the MCAT in general, and you're looking for some help to to help you break down these passages. Maybe you're like, I know the sciences. I don't know why I'm not scoring well. Like, I know the content. If you're in that boat, maybe it's a comprehension thing. You're not breaking down the passages well enough. Science or cars, you're not breaking down the questions well enough. If you need a little bit of extra help, go to medicalschoolhq.net/Jack Westin. Sign up for his cars course and let him help you guide you through your MCAT journey to get a better score, to unlock those doors to get you into medical school. Again, medicalschoolhq.net/Jack Westin. Using that link and only that link will give you a $100 off coupon for the course. It is an affiliate link, so I do get a little bit of commission if you use it, but I recommend it because so many students recommend Jack Westin's course to everyone else. So, and obviously in this podcast, you get to hear and listen to Jack Westin share his knowledge and his skills with you. So if you want more of that and more access to Jack Westin, again, medicalschoolhq.net/Jack Westin to save $100 off the course. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT Cars Podcast.